Going to a maid cafe as a lone dude can be tough, especially if your best friend and crush is there working on her first day. That's why everyone needs a Miko and a Muko in their life, to help push their girls' blossoming romance along. That's right, clever OP and ED watchers, we are finally getting to see Momo in that Maid Cafe outfit, and we get to witness the Moe tri-beam, and it's a four friends combo version this time. I love the choice of cheesy 1950s style music, giving that cool, relaxed vibe as we see a clearly overwhelmed Okarun next to a very clearly overwhelmed Momo as her two friends and us get to watch these two being awkward together. And that's even before they start messing with her to ruin her May It Get Tastier spell. Before we go further, real quick, Dandadan fit check. Got this tie-dye shirt with Seiko, Turbo Granny, and Okarun. Feel like I gotta try to wear a new Dandadan related shirt each episode. I don't think I have enough for all of these, but we'll see how far I can go. It's hilarious watching the two girls give their friend flack for not being the perfect maid and doing what they can to try to throw her off. And we get to see her fluctuating between nerves at being in front of Okarun to irritation at her friends for trying to mess her up and the situation in general and how awkward she is being in the maid outfit. Something tells me she did not know what kind of a restaurant this was gonna be, and that's on Momo. This is an anime. What other kind of restaurants would even be around except for a maid cafe? I don't think other options even exist. It's also funny seeing the disparity between Miko, who's just giving her flack for not casting the May It Get Tastier spell with enough enthusiasm, versus Muko, who's just bubbly and demanding apple juice. The two are not the same, all three of them have different personalities, which is what makes their friendship together really fun. But that's fine, because we get the four of them casting that Moe tri-beam in that photo, and honestly, an entire episode of them just hanging out in the cafe would be hilarious. But that's not to be. The two girls need to go, and they drag Okarun along with them, only to get him to admit that he wants to stay for a bit. And those sneaky looks between the two means they know what they're up to. We get some awkward conversation between Okarun and Momo outside of the cafe as he tells her he'll stay and wait to walk her home. But trying to be tough, she tells him she can handle herself, and the boy leaves, leaving Momo to go back into the restaurant. And we get that title drop, feeling kind of gloomy, which then leads into the funny shots of her trying to get through her shift as the clock refuses to budge forward, her face getting more and more irritated and worn out as the evening goes on. And we get that gorgeous moment of her stepping out into the streets at night, beautifully lit up but empty. And she looks around for someone who isn't there as the music crescendos off and we think, well, this is what she asked for. Except all of a sudden she turns and there Okarun is running up to her because he came back. He didn't want to leave her to walk alone. As we see the two of them standing on opposite sides of the screen with the dim city lights behind them. And then coming together, he almost reaches out for her hand, but can't quite work up the nerve. But that's okay, because everybody who thought last episode that hand touching was gonna be the last thing that happened for 100 episodes, it's not that kind of anime, and Momo makes the move and grabs his hand. It's so cute. Way to go, Momo. You messed up earlier by making him leave, but you nailed it in the end. And so presumably the two walk home hand in hand. Maybe this is a clue that Okarun can fully pick up on. It's cute that we got this, considering that the last episode, as they were touching hands in the back of the car, was a bit more of a what are you doing? Does this mean anything kind of moment? But here we see Momo proactively grabbing his hand and holding it as they walk. And it's really hard to misinterpret that. You know, ultimately we don't get to see if they had any conversation about it, but surely this is more of a clue for Okarun that, hey, maybe this is a bit more than friendship. And it's also a very bold move for Momo to take. So good job, girl. Way to try to lay it out for him. And then that hilarious cut from his super surprised face to Ira's very, very bored face as she's slurping up boba, watching Manjiro test Jiji's ability to focus. I like this shot for a number of reasons. And one of them is just, you see a bit of photography technique usage here, where Seiko holds out the cigarette towards him and the focus pulls back, she blurs out a bit. It's a small touch, but you know, it's nice to see animators playing with techniques like that. And also the way that they animated the evil eye trying to pulse down his arm but not quite making it to his hand, the earring growing and flexing as he tries to contain it. Good job, Jiji, you're getting better at this. And just as we think that, Okarun and Momo come back. Clearly they've had a moment between them. We see Jiji and Ira noticing, especially Ira's face, noticing the closeness between Momo and Okarun, that something has happened on their walk back, and the two jealously head towards them and unfortunately collide. Ira splashes up her full boba in Jiji's face, and the joy that Okarun was feeling from his handhold walk with Momo is shattered as Evil Eye comes out. and clearly knew how they were going to deal with him from prior efforts, and manages to catch Momo with their hands outside of his cursed house and everybody else outside of it as well. Things are looking dire. Luckily, not for too much. He rips her shirt, but there's really no focus on it. And as he's pulling her closer, or squishing the house closer together so that her ability to push him back with her telekinesis isn't working, she spits a burst of water in his face and he untransforms. But that's one more method of breaking the possession that is not going to work in the future. And we can tell that everybody's affected by this. Jiji is hurt and concerned about the fact that, he thought he was getting better about holding Evil Eye back and clearly is not. And Momo is trying to pacify him, but clearly he's upset, and Okarun is more upset, shoving him out of the way and trying to make sure that Momo's okay. Even Ira can tell that this is problematic. And here we get the real reason the episode is called Feeling Kinda Gloomy. Jiji thought he had a handle on his possession, but Evil Eye broke out and almost killed his childhood friend. And now the girl that he's in love with is being comforted by his new best male friend, but clearly rival for her affections. And he's realizing that not only is he not as close to her as he wanted to be, he can't be. He's a risk. Ira feeling guilty for having caused the transformation and maybe not being able to help. Seiko being unable to break through and save her granddaughter, and having gone along with Gigi's request to not exercise the evil eye. So this is a little bit her fault as well. And of course we see Jiji looking at her hand and realizing that he hurt another person. And then there's Okarun. He was riding high just a moment ago. He did the nice thing after Momo turned him down. Momo tried to play tough and told him not to hang out while she was doing her shift, but he came back and walked her home to, keep her safe from some kind of human threat. But he wasn't able to protect her from the supernatural one. He's realizing the limitations of his power and that he once again had a situation where he wasn't strong enough to protect her. His training hasn't been enough. And now we get the premise of the episode. Everybody's feeling a little down for different reasons. It's nice to see Manjiro and Seiko having a moment to talk where he's trying to be a bit more of a realist, recognizing that it's just not working. They almost lost someone and they should call the Hayashi band back and exercise the spirit. Meanwhile, Seiko had wanted to trust in the kids. She made the tough call to hear Gigi's idealism and say, sure, let's give it a shot. And this is the result. The kids thought they could contain it and they're still acting like they can. And she's realizing that her decision to trust them and to try to protect them from the reality and the challenge of what they've chosen could mean one of them gets really, really hurt. We then cut to a nice moment between Ira and Momo, who many of us will recall have been enemies and butting heads, but it's been a little bit less. Last episode, they talked about makeup for a little bit. And sure, they clash anytime Okarun's in the room, but when it's just the two of them, Ira's really sad and apologetic. She feels awful about what happened. Not just that she caused the situation, but you can tell that she feels a little bad she couldn't do anything. And Momo's not trying to bully her for it. Momo's trying to tell her it's not a big deal and to not worry about it so much. It's nice to see the girls, having spent more time together, realizing that maybe they're not so dissimilar. In the other room, we see the two boys not talking at all, turned and facing away from each other. Jiji unable to face Okarun, probably because of the situation that happened and being jealous of him having a moment with Momo. Okarun unable to face him because he's feeling disappointed in himself for not being able to help, and maybe a little bit upset at Jiji for not being able to contain it, but it's mostly self-loathing, which is something we've seen him struggle with a lot. And that's why the next day we go to the farm where Mr. Peeny Weeny is working. I really enjoy the song that Mr. Peeny Weeny sings. This is another situation where I think the Japanese song does a much better job of capturing his dialect and a bit of the nature of the person that he is. It's good in English too, but I connected more with the Japanese voice in the song and having a picture in my head of the kind of rural folksy background that he has. It's also just really funny. But regardless, Okarun shows up to see Mr. Peeny Weeny in what we recognize as not a good alien disguise. I really like when shows do this, when they're indicating that, hey, aliens are among us, and also their disguises are not great. People just aren't catching on to it. It's like in the prior episode when Muko and Miko showed Momo the footage of the volcano, and there's blatantly a spacecraft in the photo, but nobody thinks it's real. And then when Peeny Weeny and Chiquitita took their spaceship 5 houses over to go home, there was this massive sound and it's taking up all the space and nobody's noticing the spaceship because they can't perceive it. Which is convenient because Peeny Weeny's eyes are sticking out of his hat and anybody should be able to notice that. It is cute to see that Okarun, who had been down, is presented with new information about aliens and the occult and how they blend in with humans, and that temporarily makes him forget that he's upset, and he just gets super excited and has all these questions. So what does Okarun do? He immediately drops down into a Dogeza bow to beg for help. But Mr. Peeny Weeny, being a responsible adult and a good father to his son Chiquitita, tells him that violence is no good, Deez, and just has him help her on the farm for a little bit. Which, hey, it's strength training. Maybe it'll help. But clearly it wasn't enough for Okarun. We see him getting home sore, and Jiji's eating at the table with Seiko and isn't willing to look Okarun in the eye, and Okarun similarly sees Jiji and isn't willing to sit down and eat with them. And you can feel for Seiko here. She clearly is aware of the problem brewing between the two boys, just thinking like, these teenagers. But, she lets them sort it out on their own. And so we see Okarun outside training his punches in the way that only weeps like us know how, by reading a manga and trying to emulate it. I say this often, but there's a big part of me that connects the strongest with Okarun, and it's just because of how much of a nerd he is. Luckily, Turbo Granny is there, and when she asks him if he's trying to go stronger, he's willing to be honest with her. It's actually nice to see that as much as she picks on him and all the rest of them, in the last episode, she was asking Momo where her fluffy cushion was, and she's calling her by name. And while we're not seeing it as much in the anime, it was a little bit in the ED of season 1. There are these special bonus chapters in the manga where we get to see her little adventures, and clearly there's been a bit of connecting between her and Seiko, even if they're constantly picking on each other. So it feels like Turbo Granny's growing a little bit closer to the group. Clearly enough to help Okarun, who is the one containing her powers, who she hated when she first was stuck in the little cat body. And she asks him a good question. Do you want to learn to punch, or do you want to get strong? Them's not the same things, kid. And she's willing to help him. He thought he just needed to learn how to fist fight better, but that's not really the answer. And Turbo Granny's gonna take him somewhere secretly at night. Is this our shonen training arc? We haven't had one of those in a while. It was hinted in episode 3 when Seiko was gonna make him do all this physical fitness, but it never happened. And of course, Okarun did some muscle training on his own, but we haven't had like a proper training arc in spiritual powers, and maybe that's what's gonna happen, because Turbo Granny does not seem happy with how he's using her abilities. And of course, we get a sneaky Ira following them around, which is also hilarious. They break into the school, and as Turbo Granny's, for some reason, squeezing herself under the gate, probably just to be funnier, she could have just had Okarun take her over, Ira reveals herself, and she wants to follow them. And she's doing that thing where she's got that cutesy voice with Okarun, but the second Turbo Granny says something mean to her, she transforms to Acro Silky, trash talks her as she stomps her into the ground and does her best JoJo impression. But even though Ira's tagging along, Turbo Granny's willing to take them both in, which is not something she would have done back when we first met her. There's this underlying theme in Dandadan about the more you get to know people and their motivations, the more you have the ability to connect with them. We thought Turbo Granny was pure evil until Momo connected with her when they beat her in the foot race and found out that she'd been doing what she could for all those spirits of those lost girls. And Mr. Peeny Weeny, who seemed to just be an enemy at the beginning, but turns out he was being used, and now he's become friends with the group. That's not to say that there are no evil people, but a lot of these characters have different motivations, and they find a way to connect with folks like Evil Eye and Acro Silky. Although we're still waiting to see if the former can be salvaged, or if he's truly just too big of a threat to be trusted. Ira's trying to blame that filthy talk on Acro Silky, and Okarun's just playing along like, yeah, whatever. It's funny that she's still trying to pretend she's this innocent, cutesy, Bijin, beautiful girl, when everybody knows that she's got this secondary personality. And, it'll be fun to hopefully see her willing to let that wall down entirely, which she started to do with Momo, and once she can be more of her true self. And we finally get to the destination, and are we about to do the 7 school mysteries? If you watch anime enough, especially any that take place in like a middle or high school, you're familiar with the 7 school mysteries that they often use, where there are these haunted or spiritual locations in the school. And the music room is often one of those examples where students will hear spooky music, but there won't be anybody in the room, or maybe some kind of ghost possessing it. So, why are we using the music room as the particular school mystery? Well, Turbo Granny's about to use the piano to explain to Okarun why he sucks. And the reason he sucks is he fights on a 2-note rhythm. Meanwhile, Ira, when she's in Acro Silky's form, and certainly Evil Eye, are fighting in a 4 rhythm at least. Okarun's pulling off half as many moves as his opponents, and the only reason that he managed to take out Evil Eye a couple episodes ago is purely because of Turbo Granny's speed, which she is quick to remind him. You can critique yourself, Okarun, but you do not trash talk Turbo Granny's powers. So he's got to learn how to take more moves in the same amount of time. Okarun was able to use Turbo Granny's speed to just barely beat the Evil Eye, but aside from that, his technique is lacking, and he needs to get stronger if he wants to be able to contend with this power, which is growing in Jiji. But did we walk all the way to the school just so Turbo Granny could play on a piano? Surely she could have downloaded an app on Momo's phone for that. Nope, then we hear the piano play, and what is Ira's immediate reaction? Throw a punch at the nearest available face, which is Okarun's. Not great for her, punching the boy you like in the face, but as far as defensive moves go in a supernatural action like this, not a bad move. If you're looking for techniques, Ira's defensive school, move number 1, punch the nearest face. But who played that piano, and is it related to someone teaching him to be faster? How about the ghost of classical musicians? How about big-headed floating ghosts of classical musicians, all with their own instrument and glowing eyes? That's right, we are really locking into the musical element of this, but I can't say how because that's part of next episode. So who are these different ghosts? I'm not gonna name them all, but clearly the one you see with the red eyes at the piano in the beginning looks a lot like Beethoven. So are the others also related to famous classical musicians? I mean, the answer is yes, but in case they name them in the next episode, I'm not gonna give away any more than that now. You'll find out next week as we find out why they're in this classroom and how these musicians are gonna hopefully be able to train up Okarun, and maybe Ira too, since she's there with him. Are we about to get a duo training arc? If you have a guess for who each of the ghosts are, let me know in the comments, along with how you think this is gonna fit into training for Okarun and Ira. Plus, what do you expect Momo and Jiji are gonna be up to in the meantime? I'll be back next week to talk about it. It's going to be during Anime NYC, so I might not be doing quite as much editing and intercutting of episode footage because I'll be at the con. But regardless, I'm excited to come back next week and talk to you about what's going on in episode 8 of the second season. We're getting close to the end, folks, but there's a lot more to pack in before we get there. So I'll see you next time.